Thanks everybody for joining. Hope that everybody is faring well out there in the world with all the challenges that are going on. And certainly in some parts of hemp country, we've got wildfires and at least one person that's a contributor and reader had to evacuate their home in the middle of the night Monday night. So hope you guys are all safe and doing well. The 2020 season, so I'm going to do a first look at the at our survey data, but also cover some brief general market overview stuff as we are here in September and approaching harvest. And so without, I'll go ahead and start in. So as far as the overall 2020 season, drought has definitely impacted the Southwest. That has reduced Colorado's yield this year, and then just recently they were hit with a snow. So I know that people everywhere from well north of Denver down to Pueblo were shaking snow off of their plants the other day, and I think they've still had some lingering snow in the Rockies up until today as well. So those are a radical shift in temperatures from over 100 degrees to freezing temps and frosts. And the frosts have actually been fairly widespread too. Both the plains and the upper Midwest all the way over to Lake Superior have seen frost, but hemp plants, mature hemp plants are pretty rugged late in the season. I've seen it in Central Oregon, temps drop down into the lower 20s for 12 hours at a time and not impacted the crop. So should be okay there. Jackson County, Oregon had 6,300 acres planted this year, or I'm sorry, permitted this year. And they've had really bad wildfires encroaching on Medford, even there in Southern Oregon, where has a very strong flower market. It's the northern part of the Emerald Triangle there. A lot of good flower comes out of that area. And up till now, they've had really good weather, of course, dry weather, which reduces any kind of fungal problems. But now fires are threatening those crops and, more importantly, people's homes and lives. Anyway, we wish you all well there. But again, frosts in some parts of the country. The South has had a really wet summer, Gulf Coast in particular, with storms, hurricanes, really compounded issues there. And Louisiana had a high incidence of fungal diseases already in July, so that hasn't gotten better. You know, these weather impacts on crops will certainly have some regional impacts on certain markets, certainly markets that are focused around certain form factor, pelletized or cannabinoid profile. So there may be some supply issues, but in general, this won't impact the overall supply and demand picture. Okay, so this map right here is a representation of Farm Service Agency's registered acres for the year. We anticipated a more thorough accounting of acreage, planted acres for 2020, but because so many states are operating on the 2014 pilot program, we've seen a lot of acres not reported. This map right here represents about just under 50,000 acres. And that's for over 400,000 permitted acres this year. So we think it's more than twice as much as what FSA is presenting, but that's because people aren't reporting. And if you go to the next slide here, just as an example, if you look at Oregon, down in Southwestern Oregon, you know, the acreage there, Jackson County, one of the most productive counties there, isn't even on the map. So we know that it's missing significant acreage there. So with that, please register your acreage. All of you producers, if you don't have a relationship with FSA, just find your local office. They'll probably do it with you online and set it up. USDA uses these numbers to develop programs. So for instance, the crop insurance program for 2020 was contingent on a state having over 1,000 acres registered as planted, listed as planted last year, reported to FSA. So please register your acres. That'll you know, should help with program offerings if the USDA expands their offerings. One thing, if you'll go to the next slide, George, one thing we were really surprised to see is the extent that coronavirus really changed planting plans. So we see over 41% here, you know, didn't plant this year because of coronavirus. So we knew that it was had certainly some impact, but this is pretty significant that nearly half of the people that were planning to plant, and this probably represents some people that reduced acreage also, but many of these people did not plant. They did forego planting totally. And certified organic, we see much less than our last survey of people that responded with growing organic crops. We think just more attention to the certified organic, and I think this is probably more representative of actual certified organic crop. Definitely a shift. And then for flower production, something that we're closely tracking because flower markets have been particularly active. A large portion of people, almost 2/3, are growing for flower, whether they're high grading their crop and taking the top off, best coals off their stands. But still, many people are really vying for those markets. And we also learned that flower yields are an average for respondents 845 pounds per acre. And just as a comparison, Southern Oregon, it's not uncommon to see 3,000 pounds per acre yields. 845 pounds per acre, which also probably represents people high grading or taking a portion of their crop. And 51, just over half of that material they consider as premium product or top shelf product. Now, we still lack really good systems for grading hemp flower, but as we worded in our survey, reflective of some standards in the cannabis industry and hemp and ATSM, that AAA and up flower yields were that figure, 845 pounds per acre, and half of that was actually what you'd consider 4A flower quality or premium quality flower. So that I think that is probably consistent with what other producers are seeing, but it probably does also skew towards Oregon flower producers, if I had to guess. Flower is being produced all over the United States, but with the humidity that we experience in the eastern part of the United States, certainly in the Gulf Coast areas and even the Northeast, it's much more challenging to produce fungal-free flower with the genetics we have now. These dense, heavy buds are really prone to fungal disease, and really that's based on a lot of factors, and certainly the overall weather, but also airflow on your farm, plant spacing, things like that. And also indoor production has really ramped up. You see, we over something like 2,000 acres that are permitted this year for indoor and greenhouse production. So those other areas of the country have really increased their production under cover. And that indoor quality flower will be definitely premium, some of the best material. And so as you look at overall acreage here, this is our estimation for planted acreage this year, sits at 123,654 acres. The top yellow you see there, 3156, represents fiber acres. A lot of those acres are farmers experimenting around the country, but some of those are, 200-acre plots in areas like Colorado and even Texas. Still not a lot of fiber infrastructure out there. IND in Montana just announced they're adding a decorticator, but decortication activity is still pretty low. But a lot of projects ramping up and capitalizing right now. Now, part of this CBD acreage, the 99,360, which represents 80% of this year's crop, is certainly 10 to 15% of that is CBG. So we've lumped together all cannabinoids under a category of CBD here. And then hemp seed at 21,138, 17% of the crop. That's an increase from last year, and we've gotten a better handle on hemp seed markets, and aware of this kind of acreage in terms of marketing contracts for this year with hemp seed. So we're confident that that number is close to what's out there. Now that area of the world right now is definitely seeing some cooler temps, but that's not completely unheard of in the northern plains in September. They also got a late start, so that crop certainly will depend on good weather going forward here into harvest for those that have not harvested their hemp seed crops there. And just following along into hemp seed production, this gives you a projection for hemp seed production over the next 3 years. It's about a 5% increase annually. Right now, we're producing just over 12,000 tons of hemp seed nationwide. And then also, if you look at the next one, the volume of hemp seed meal, and you can go to the next slide, please, George. There you go. Hemp seed meal and hemp seed oil. Hemp seed oil markets are really ramping up, and demand for hemp seed oil has increased. The byproduct of hemp seed oil is hemp seed meal, high protein, excellent feed additive, not yet legal. So we're looking towards regulatory changes there that'll allow that product in livestock feeds over the coming year, 18 months, and that should radically shift the economics of that segment. Okay, that pretty much covers hemp seed production. So the things that are really impacting hemp markets still are regulatory issues. First and foremost, the USDA's IFR interim final rule issued last year. It's a real concern for states that are operating under the 2014 pilot program that do not have a USDA approved plan, what the transition will look like November 1st. New York State, for instance, recently said that they won't be administrating their own hemp program. Producers, they all have to seek certification or permitting through the USDA. Not sure what other states are going to do at this point, and those states are also not really sure what that means for producers. So that's a major challenge for the industry on the supply side right now, and for producers. They just reopened the comment period, so if you haven't, if you haven't submitted comments to USDA on that, we know they're listening. Key USDA people told us back in July that they'd be reopening the comment period. We know that they're listening, so please make sure you send some comments in. The other major, we'll stick on this one for a little bit to cover. Unfortunately, there's a lot of policy issues impacting hemp. The newest one is the DEA. The DEA's just come out with their interim final rule, which declared that all extracts over 0.3% THC, hot extracts, are Schedule 1 narcotic. So this creates a lot of risk overnight for extractors and anyone long in these extracts that has hot material in storage. And I would suspect that there are probably hundreds of thousands of kilos out there, which is be a pretty big haul for the DEA. So producers are taking different approaches to mitigate their risk as they move product around. No word on any kind of enforcement action on this. It's an interim final rule also, so make sure that you provide feedback to the Drug Enforcement Administration. But that's unfortunate news that the Drug Enforcement Administration is involved in the hemp industry now. And again, hot extracts, that's just the nature of extraction. You concentrate all cannabinoids, one of them being THC. Rod Kite, an attorney, cannabis attorney, calls it work in progress extracts. And these work in progress extracts need some kind of legislative protection so that producers can maintain products similar to distillers who are able to have high proof liquor during the manufacturing process, but on the shelf it's regulated. And then finally, from a federal, and so in terms of pricing and markets, we suspect that full spectrum products with THC in them above the threshold will probably see some price weakening. There'll be pressure on those markets. We may see some strengthening in the NDT, non-detect, or T-free markets, though we're not seeing that right now. We're seeing price declines in both of those areas, particularly in the full spectrum. And again, finally, the Food and Drug Administration has added their sent their regulations to the White House Office of Management and Budget. So they got a lot of input in last month from key stakeholders. So we're eager to see what this enforcement, what the scope of the enforcement is from the FDA, and how that'll impact the industry. So those kinds of things can have a major impact. And if you'll go ahead and hit the next slide there, George. One of the things we did this once before in June. We provided our pricing to show the decline of biomass pricing for the USDA and their Cfap program. The coronavirus food aid package for farmers, something like $16 billion for producers that hemp has been excluded from. So we hope that this 8% decline, which is for Q2, we've heard rumors of around 2 of Cfap, so we hope that hemp is included in this. Hemp industry was already challenged before the coronavirus, and certainly hasn't helped things. Okay, and just as a add on the full spectrum distillate forecast, seeing that pressure from the DEA IFR, and we'll likely see more price erosion than this by the time November rolls around. So there is a brief overview of markets and our survey responses. That's our first look at survey. We'll be doing more of this over the coming month, and eager to take any of your questions if you have them.
All right, Chase. Well, we got a couple questions here. I'll just go ahead and throw them at you as I have them here. Is the hemp seed both grain and seed, or just grain?
Yeah, hemp seed, our convention is hemp seed, one word, denotes hemp seed grain, whereas 2 words, hemp seed, is seed for sowing. We don't really report on those markets, on input markets like seeds, though we do get some data like we got from the survey. It did show some pricing for seed. Producers paid on average 72 cents per seed.
Okay. Another question here is, any hope for CFAP assistance for hemp growers?
Yeah, so back to what I said there, I really think that there is some good hope. You know, I think the USDA is really skeptical about numbers in the industry at all. The Jacobsen is well respected. We're used in a wide range of agricultural commodities, so we hope that will help and sway the USDA in providing this funding for hemp growers, because it would be extremely useful to producers.
Okay. And just a reminder to the attendees, go ahead and submit your questions if you still have them. I have some other questions to go through, but now's the time to submit them so we can go through and address them all. Chase, do you think the USDA will extend the November 1st date to 2021?
I do not think so. I do not think that they can do that. For one, they don't have the authority to do that. That would take a legislative move, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of appetite for that legislative, from legislative bodies or from the USDA. What contingencies they're going to put in place, whether it's just go ahead and look the other way and sort of let it all settle down. It's really unclear how that transition is going to go. But along with the coronavirus right now, we think that it would be a real win-win if the USDA or policymakers extended until 1 year, till 2021, November 1st, 2021. That would certainly, because the states are also administering these programs, and states have been handed a mandate to manage a program in which they don't have staffing for, testing all the fields and sampling all the fields and all of the work that's required from an oversight body are really not something that states can do, particularly with their budgets in shambles following the economic fallout from the pandemic. So, yeah.
Okay. How many responses did we receive on the report versus the number of total growers across the country?
So we received just over 200 on this one, last one 400. We think that I actually can't remember that number, but I think that it's under 2,000 right now.
Okay. Is CBG taking market share from CBD or just growing the market?
It's a good question. CBG, we've been skeptical as far as demand for CBG products, simply because there isn't much of a retail presence for CBG products. And, one of the things in terms of wider market adoption we look at is, we know that everyone on this call or most know what CBG is and the people we work with, but, do your aunt and, your grandfather or your babysitter, do they know what CBG is? And people are still sorting out what CBD is. So it's unclear what the demand for CBG is, but we do think it's increasing and will likely grow the market to some extent overall. We are seeing good returns from, even though we don't report on CBG derivatives, we're seeing pricing that as much as double on CBG crude. And on isolate, I think that they may be seeing more, but that price has definitely declined to the point that that it's within reach of twice of CBD isolate too.
Okay. This question I'm not familiar with, so maybe you are. Are we following the Texas case going to court next week?
I assume this is about flower and flower markets. That's a different action. That was a state action by Texas state courts that state that. So definitely following that. Not as closely. We definitely look to readers and contributors in Texas to keep us informed on that for whatever's not available to us and other people in the media. But I think unless that's something other besides flower, yes, we're following that in Texas. Overall, the flower bans don't seem to have impacted the market significantly. But Texas and Indiana, if Texas is a huge market for hemp flower. We know that. We know from exports from Oregon and other places that Texas has a really strong flower market. But yeah, it's unclear which way that's going to go.
Okay. Do you have any data on whether and how many producers switch from CBD to fiber production?
Is that weather in terms of atmospheric weather?
No, any data on whether or not, how many producers switch from CBD to fiber production?
Yeah, I don't have any data on that. What I do know is that a large portion of growers, probably in the range of 15%, are experimenting with fiber this year. That actually is more reflective on acreage. And certainly people are starting with lower acreage, but we know that some of that acreage down in the Gulf Coast, for instance, saw some lodging with storms there, as their agricultural departments report. So it's really unclear, but nobody is really gearing up with fiber for market yet. Those markets really aren't there. Producers are experimenting with the crop and using their equipment lines to see how it works in a hemp crop and problem solving, the kinds of things that I would do as a producer before I was really eager to go to market. But we see those markets developing and producers that are poised to plant a fiber crop and are geared up to do it will be in a good position when those markets unfold.
Okay. How about any data from people going from CBD to seed?
Again, no real significant data for that. I don't think that that's a major trend. The Northern Plains is the key production area, Montana, North Dakota, Minnesota. There is some hemp seed being produced in other areas of the country. It is a challenging crop to grow and store and aerate and keep from going rancid. But I don't think I see any major shift of cannabinoid production to hemp seed production, but certainly plenty of experimentation, people looking to that. A lot of that's based on markets too. The markets for hemp seed are really consolidated. So if you're in the Southeast and want to sell hemp seed, or in the Southwest or even the Northwest, markets are some distance away. Although we do know there's some hemp seed production in Eastern Oregon this year too.
Okay. Thanks, Chase. Are the acres that you reported on FSA recorded acres, direct survey acres, or some other methodology to determine the acres?
Yeah, so that acreage from FSA would be reported acreage. So every hemp producer that went to the FSA, I assume many of those, particularly hemp seed producers in Northern Plains that grow other agricultural crops and work with FSA, so they've got maps on file and have participated in FSA programs. So that, I think, is a bulk of that acreage, but that's producer listed acreage. So it's certainly not vetted, but that acreage is likely accurate for the entities that reported it.
Okay. And I think this will be our last question, Chase. Is the hemp fiber sector, based on 2020 acres grown, expanding at the pace you predicted, or is the growth turning out to be slower?
You know, I don't think we anticipated fiber to be to have a whole lot of legs on it in terms of the market growing. There's a lot of infrastructure that has to be put in place and product development, but those things are moving along at the right pace. I think that you know, whenever I've looked at that market, I've looked at it in sort of a 5-year time horizon, and I think that's more realistic to really see that market gear up and grow some legs. So, you know, I&D hemp in Montana, that I think is I wasn't aware of that decorticator coming online. I think that's great news, as is the news that Georgia Pacific is producing the hemp-based wipes with Bass Fiber Technologies in Canada. That production will be in Europe, which makes sense for this enterprise where, you know, they don't need to reinvent the wheel, using some existing infrastructure and expertise over there, product development and developing manufacturing systems. So I think things are moving along at an expected pace. You know, hemp does attract a lot of attention and I think some investment. The Canopy Growth alums that you know, raised I think upwards of 100 and I'm not exactly sure, many millions of dollars for their Blank Check Corporation. You know, shows a lot of appetite for investors to invest in fiber. And what we do know is that once the supply chain and value chain is in place for this product, it will be very easy for producers to gear up and produce baled product, put it on semis, and transport it at least some distance. You know, whether it's beyond 60, 80 miles, that makes economical sense. Certainly when we start, we'll probably see producers push the envelope there. Eventually, it'll be probably moderately sized decorticators with a circumference of production around there, of hemp production.
Chase,
So,
you got one more
not a
point.
real fast pace, but it is coming along, I think.
Who's bringing decortication in on Canada?
Good question on Canada. So the manufacturing that I'm talking about with Bass Fiber Technologies in Canada, that's going to be European hemp fiber.
Okay. Well, Chase, thank you so much for taking the time. To the attendees, we're going to have a recording of this posted up on our site here, hopefully later this afternoon. We'll also have Chase's slide deck, and we'll also have a section for additional questions that you can send to the Jacobsen regarding anything related to what we presented here today. And thank you so much for taking the time to jump in and share your questions with us. Chase, thank you.
Thanks, George. Thanks, everybody, for joining us.